All right, I'm with Bob Moriarty, founder and publisher of 321gold.com. Bob, I think this is the first time that we are recording video in one of our conversations. It's usually audio only, so it's a pleasure to be here with you today.
It's funny you mention that because I've done lots of Zoom interviews, and it hadn't occurred to me everything we've ever done was audio and written.
Yeah, yeah, because that's how it started when we had the first one, and it worked well, and we just stuck with it. So I figured, oh, it's time for a change. A lot to talk about today. The first thing that comes to my mind is Trump's speech at the Bitcoin conference on Saturday. There was a Bitcoin conference in Nashville, Tennessee. He got up on the stage and he was in his full salesman mode, saying that Bitcoin is going to the moon, telling the audience to never sell your Bitcoin, that if he is president, the government will never sell the Bitcoin that it has, I guess, seized in various raids of uh, crimes, et cetera. The government actually has quite a bit of Bitcoin, and he said that if he's president, it will never get sold. So overall, very bullish speech for Bitcoin, and also very unusual speech for a former president and a potential future president. What did you make of his comments?
I think that Trump was pimping himself. Now, I think the number was 1.6% of the total Bitcoin. And frankly, I don't consider that significant. And frankly, if you buy an asset and you never sell it, do you have a profit? And I think the answer to that is no. I think that Trump was pimping for votes. And unfortunately, this year's election is going down as the most corrupt, dirty, obscene election in history. I don't like any of the candidates. I like some of what Robert Kennedy came up and said until he said that he thought that the genocide in Gaza was just wonderful. And I thought, okay, he's pimped himself out too. This is scary. We were talking off camera about the New York Times and the Seymour Hersh report about Biden being strong-armed into giving up the run for president. And I think that was absolutely accurate. But it's really scary to me that for the first time in American history, we have a president who wants to be in power for another 6 months, who is totally under dementia and out of control. And do you realize how much damage he can do in 6 months?
Yeah, I mean, on June, I believe it was June 27th, I'm not mistaken, when he got up on stage there with Trump, he really showed his age. And, part of me felt sorry for the man because Father Time, catches up with all of us. There's no avoiding it. But when you're a shell of your former self and you have to get up in front of millions of people and have a coherent conversation and articulate some cogent points, and the man is stumbling and stammering through it, it's painful to see, and it's not presidential at all. And it's sad that's how it's ended, but clearly he didn't want to give up the reins, and a lot of his people close around him, including his son, his wife, didn't want him to give up the reins. So he held on basically to the bitter end. And that Seymour Hersh article is pretty shocking. I don't agree with everything he says, but he gets it right probably more than he gets it wrong. And it is in the New York Times, which is pretty far left leaning paper. And for him to say that they basically threatened Biden on that Sunday morning, the 21st, which was exactly 1 week ago, with the 25th Amendment, and that's what finally, okay, he said, okay, I'll sign the document and right away my reelection campaign. But what a way to go out. And the story rings true based upon what we know.
I totally agree. You just raised an important issue about the left wing. Since the attempted assassination of Trump, there have been two things that kind of whacked me upside the head because of their massive stupidity and clear just deceit. If you remember when the director of the Secret Service was testifying in front of Congress and was asked, okay, why were there no Secret Service agents on that roof? And she started talking into, well, it would be far too dangerous to go onto a sloped roof. And I was thinking, wait a minute, the reason we have roofs is to put a slope on them so they shed the snow and they shed the rain. All roofs are sloped. And that was like a 3-degree slope. And I thought, my God, she just said, we're concerned that our agents might trip and hurt their leg, but we don't give a damn about the person we're supposed to be protecting. I mean, it was so one-sided. I just thought that's remarkable. But Chris Wray, the head of the FBI, surpassed that. Do you recall what he testified to about the bullet?
No, I didn't catch that.
He said, we don't know if Trump was hit by a bullet or shrapnel. You know, maybe
I thought they confirmed it was a bullet. I thought just in the last.
They did.
Okay.
But come on, I mean, it was so simple. A photographer took a picture, and you could see the bullet whizzing past Trump. I mean, to say that it could be shrapnel is what? Why would you think?
It's crazy. You know, when I heard the theory that what caught him was the glass from the telecom, that didn't make any sense because we didn't see any fracturing of glass. There was no glass shards on the ground. It's just crazy. And I believe the bullet that grazed his ear actually went and hit another object, hydraulic pump or something off in the distance. So I don't know where the shrapnel theory ever came from.
Well, it didn't come from anywhere except Chris Wray's imagination. And he was going to try to throw shade on Donald Trump. I think as a guy who was in the military and fired a lot of weapons and had a lot of weapons fired at him, Donald Trump was 1 inch from dying. Okay. If you ever get a chance to follow him into a 7-Eleven and watch over his shoulder when he does the pick six, write those numbers down because he's the luckiest person in the entire universe. He just twisted at exactly the right moment. And while I'm not a Donald Trump fan, I think the idea of having the Praetorian Guard select the next president is a really bad idea.
Yeah, I agree. Watching him speak about Bitcoin the way he did, imagine if he said the same thing about gold. It is unheard of for a US president or even a former president or a potential future president, leading presidential candidate, to advocate openly for a competitor to the US dollar. I mean, since 2020, we're in uncharted territory in so many different ways in the world. I mean, the last 4 years has been incredible, and it's all these events are happening on hyperspeed, But now we have the leading presidential candidate openly advocating for Bitcoin. If you had told me that in 2019 or 2018, I would have said, you're making up a story. You're on drugs, Bob. I'll talk to you later. And now it's happening. What do you make of that? And I mean, you said he's on his, he's sort of being a salesman, but is it dangerous that he's doing this?
Uh, yes and no. Okay. You raised a good point. The U.S. national debt has doubled in 4 years. It just hit 35 trillion last week, and it's increasing $1 trillion every 100 days. We have a drunken sailor in the White House planning on spending money and clutching at power for the next 6 months. We have 5.5 wars going on in the world. We have the stock market that certainly looks like it's about to take a swan dive. We have NVDA dropping $1 trillion in 6 weeks. I think the next 4 to 6 months can be one of the most dangerous times in world history. And the really strange thing is, I don't think anyone is smart enough to predict what's going to happen because there's too many black swans out there. Some of it is just totally nuts. For Trump to advocate on Bitcoin's behalf, what? The president's not in charge of that.
Yeah, exactly. He thinks he's the king. I mean,
Excuse me. What did you just say?
I said he thinks he's the king.
No shit.
So in the 1920s, there was a Republican campaign slogan. It's been it's been attributed to Hoover, but it was really a party campaign slogan. And it was a chicken in every pot. And my father was a child of the 1930s, and he used to tell me the story about how, the politicians would say a chicken in every pot, and they would buy votes. Well, the politicians of the 1920s got nothing on the present day Republican and Democratic parties. I mean, the next it's not even 4 months, 3.5 months are going to be the biggest vote buying exercise in world history. And they're spending money that's not only not theirs, but they don't have. And they're spending money with debt and more debt with no end in sight. How does this end, Bob?
Send empire. You get the fools. Okay. Now, while I don't like Trump, I also don't believe there's enough dead people in the United States to elect Kamala Harris. And just as an aside, do you happen to remember what Herbert Hoover's occupation was?
No.
Come on, you should know that.
Car salesman?
Yeah, it was a mining engineer.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. All right. So next topic. You said that you think the stock market is ready to do a swan dive, but we've said that before. It's looked like that before. But is that really going to happen? The Fed's about to cut interest rates. The Fed's going to cut a lot. The fiscal side continues to pour money into the economy. So, I mean, is it just looking like that, or is it something that's really going to happen? Because I'm a little skeptical on the bearish swan dive theory here.
Well, here's the issue. I think, and I think this very strongly. We have so many serious issues going on that one, it's going to be unpredictable because of the butterfly effect, and two, we have all these players with conflicting points of view and everybody going their own way. Obama and Clinton versus Biden versus Kamala Harris versus Trump versus Chris Wray. You got the Russians and the Ukrainians. The Russians are preparing for a land war defensively, okay, which means they think something's going on. We have this horrible, horrible genocide going on in Gaza. And there are so many things that could spark utter disaster that I just think something bad is going to happen. And some really bright, big money guys have said, look, you have hit the end of borrow and spend. And I can just flat out predict you give Joe Biden a pen in one hand and an ice cream cone in the other hand, and you put him in front of a checkbook, you got a problem.
All right. So turning to metals, I think the two metals I want to talk about are gold and copper. Copper has been hammered the last couple of weeks, and actually, your favorite daily sentiment index says that copper is one of the two or three most oversold and worst sentiment markets in the entire world right now. So that makes it very interesting from a contrarian standpoint. So I'm interested in your thoughts on that. I think gold got whacked a bit a week or so. Actually, it got whacked on Thursday, but it also got whacked the week before, just after making an all-time high at 24.88. But gold has a bid under it. So when it has these down days, when it drops 50 or 100 bucks, buyers step in, and it's acting more and more like a bull market in my estimation.
I think you're absolutely correct. The DSI for gold never got above 88, and that is not a killer. It was only 84 when gold hit 24.80. Gold has only come down 100 bucks. Come on, I mean, that is not even a real correction. Silver's come down 10%, gold's come down 4%. Come on, that's perfectly natural and perfectly normal, and frankly, I'm comfortable with it. Now, copper, on the other hand, there's a very simple reason copper got hammered. And if you remember, I was talking about how many black swans and conflicting points of view. Copper got hammered. Give me one word that tells me why copper got hammered.
China.
Thank you. It's that simple. It's not even confusing. China has actually been exporting copper, okay? And everybody was betting that China was going to take up the slack, okay? I own a piece of a big silver lead zinc mine in Bolivia, and zinc has gone from 132 to 118 in about 10 days. Okay, so zinc and lead and copper have gotten whacked for a simple reason. That's called China. And frankly, I like simple explanations because they make a lot of sense. You don't have to analyze anything. The Chinese stock market and the Chinese real estate market's an utter disaster. They need to come back into equilibrium, and they're not there yet. If anybody's looking for China to bail out the world, it's not going to happen.
But China has a lot of forex reserves. They continue to diversify away from the dollar and treasuries, and gold is a beneficiary, and to a lesser extent, silver is as well. And I don't think that's going to change. I mean, China has more than $3 trillion in reserves, and as bad as their economy might be, and the property bubble that they're dealing with, might be very prolonged. It might take another few years to work through the supply. I still think that they're net buyers of gold.
Absolutely, yes.
Another topic. So turning to junior mining, I blogged a week or so ago this calendar of junior mining seasonality, and basically I say that August is one of the better months of the year for the sector, and that's based upon, looking back over the last 30 years. More often than not, the juniors go up in August. There's a few reasons for that. What are your thoughts on the seasonality this year? And what are your thoughts on the potential for tax loss selling when we get into October, November, this year?
Uh, it's a complicated answer. I think your views on seasonality are correct. I think we're still going to look good. We're at the end of July now. We'll be into August shortly. And the gold stocks have been hammered so much that I believe they're going to continue to go up, even relative to gold. And the real key is going to be tax loss selling season. Come mid-November, gold shares are going to be on the sales block, and people are going to see values that they never believed possible because everything's gotten whacked. We were talking earlier about Snowline. Snowline came out with absolutely extraordinary results and got hammered. And they got hammered because everybody that's buying gold stocks now is in the buy the rumor, sell the news. Okay, so somebody could come out with 400 meters of 3-ounce gold and the stock would go down.
400 meters of 3 ounce. Wow, that would be pretty special. Let's talk about some individual juniors. So you mentioned Snowline, and that's an interesting one. There's a couple of theories there for what happened last week. One is that people are really concerned about the First Nations, in the Yukon, and potentially turning negative and against mining exploration and mining, period. I'm a little skeptical on that explanation because I think it's one of the only industries they have. It brings a lot of money to the territory. But sometimes markets sell off on fear and uncertainty. I think a better explanation actually is what you said, sell on the news. They put out a stellar intercept, but it was an infill hole. And the Lassonde curve begins to, assert itself that they're past the exploration and discovery phase, and they're getting into the pre-feasibility and feasibility stage. And generally, investors find that to be less interesting. So that could be one explanation. Another one is newfound gold. So I would say newfound gold and Snowline are the two best gold, discovery stories of the last several years, both in Canada. Newfound gold does not have a resource, but the newfound chart looks very similar to the Snowline chart the last couple of weeks. What are your thoughts on newfound gold and where that company is going?
I actually am very close to Colin Cattell. I literally got him thrown out of a Las Vegas casino when he was 17. And I was teaching him the intricacies of learning how to shoot craps. Newfound gold is probably the best deposit found in Canada in the last 50 years. Some of the things are simply obscene. They have gold coming right to surface, and they took a pump out and they washed down the bedrock, which was down maybe a meter or half a meter or 2 meters. They washed it off, and you could see the gold in the rock. You could go out with the gold pan and a sledgehammer and make enough money to pay for your beans and bacon. Okay. They have probably the most extraordinary deposit found in Canada in the last 50 years. And I highly suspect, because there's another company I'm very closely associated with, Nevada King, They don't want to do a resource. They don't need to do a resource. They have enormous support from the institutions. They have a fair price. They're drilling the crap out of the thing. It looks like Swiss cheese. And I'm certain they've got an internal idea of what they've got. But I'll tell you right now, they've got somewhere between 5 million and 50 million ounces, and I can't tell you which is more accurate.
That's a big range, Bob.
Damn straight it is. That's how clueless I am. And the funny thing about newfound gold is it doesn't make any difference what the results are. And they keep releasing these extraordinary results, and nobody cares because there have been hundreds of holes just as good. Okay, it's just a really funny story. But Nevada King, I wrote a piece about them recently, and I talked to Colin. I said, look, when are you guys going to come up with 43-101? And he said, we're not going to. We don't want to. Okay. They don't need to, first of all. And Cal Heron did a video 8 months ago and predicted exactly where they would find the source of the gold. And they poked a hole into this anticline, and it certainly looks like the source of the gold. And it was a home run hole. It'll take 6 months to prove it. But I think Colin Cattell is going to go down as one of the company makers, certainly the youngest company maker in this particular cycle. But I love newfound gold. I love Nevada King. And we didn't mention West Red Lake gold. West Red Lake is, when you go down and you talk to your broker and you order shares in West Red Lake, you need to sneak out of the building when you leave, because the police could be there and they could charge you with stealing. Now, I'm going to look and see what their market cap is, because it's something.
About 170 million in Canada.
Let me see. $179 million Canadian.
Yeah.
Now, I have had a couple of long phone calls with Shane, who I think is the best manager in the business, period, across the entire spectrum. And I talked to Gwen Preston last week. They just hired her to be in charge of communications, and she's brilliant. I think Shane publicly says the mill cost $650 million. And I said, what would the replacement cost be? And he said, oh, $1 billion easy. They got this brand new 800-ton-a-day mill that originally cost $650 million. The replacement cost of $1 billion. No question, they have a couple of million ounces of high-grade gold, and they got a market cap of $179 million. Now, give me a break, okay? Buying shares in West Red Lake is as close to stealing as you can get. Now, of course, if you're stealing in California, you want to limit it to
$999.
Okay. If you keep it below $1,000, it's not really stealing. It's, contributing to the economy, I guess.
Going back to newfound gold and Snowline, very similar companies in a lot of ways. Newfound gold made their discovery more in the 2019-2020 time period, and then continued to expand it and make it better over the last several years. Snowline made their discovery in 2021 and then made it better in the last few years and put out a resource, 7.3 million ounces just in the last several weeks. Newfound has not put out a resource, but let's give them credit for 5 million ounces. Is the poor trading performance of both of these stocks recently, in the case of Newfound Gold last year, has been pretty piss poor. Is it just that these companies are running up against sort of the law of large numbers, that $1 billion market cap level that is often very difficult for junior mining companies to surpass? It's just when you don't have a fully permitted, built, and operating mine, $1 billion seems to be the stopping point on the upside for a lot of these companies. And then I'll take it one step further. Like, for example, in the case of Snowline, the deposit is in a very remote location in the far eastern side of the territory, where there's not great road access even. There's certainly no power. Like all this key infrastructure is going to have to be built to support that mining operation. And we know those things, the permitting and the construction of those things doesn't happen quickly. So you might be looking at another 7, 8, 10 years before that mine is permitted and operating. So the time value of money says, well, it can only be worth so much today. Maybe Newfound Gold is in a much better location, but still they have to go through permitting, which is going to take years, right? And so is it that these companies have just seen their best days, and they can only go so high?
No, not at all. I think there's a factor. We talked a little bit about it when we were off camera. Mark Faber talks about there being a bowl, okay, and you fill the bowl with liquid, and it's balanced on the head of the pin, and it goes in one direction, and some liquid flows out, and then it goes another direction, and some liquid flows out, and then it goes another direction, liquid flows out. You have to consider the alternatives to investing, and certainly investing in the general stock market, specifically in the Magnificent Seven, and investing in the cryptocurrencies have sucked trillions of dollars of investment money out of the potential market for resource stocks. Now, let me, are you sitting down comfortably? If I said something absolutely outrageous, I mean, you're not going to fall over, are you?
I hope not. I hope not.
Okay, I can't remember who came up with it, but I believe the numbers are accurate because it certainly sounded credible. He said in the 1960s, there was 17% of money in investing went into mining stocks. Today, it's 0.3%, 0.3%. Okay. Because I was investing in the 60s and 70s and 80s, I got a feel that most people, including yourself, because of your age, wouldn't have. People have no idea of how cheap gold stocks are today. And there may be the flavor of the month, like NVDA. I called the top NVDA to the day because the chart was identical to the chart of silver back in April of 2011, and I called the top in silver to the day in April of 2011. When you go those parabolic rises, okay, I don't care what the fundamentals are. Fundamentals don't have anything to do with anything. The only thing that changes the value of stock is sentiment. When everybody in the room wants to be in the stock, you have no more buyers. You only have sellers. NVIDIA has peaked. The interesting thing to me is that the cryptocurrencies crashed and have recovered, and they're back to Bitcoin being almost $70,000. But I think you're going to have a revaluation between now and October of the Magnificent Seven, of the S&P, of the NASDAQ. And I think the revaluation is going to take those prices lower. When that money starts to flow into resource stocks, it's going to blow the lid off of stocks.
You know, money goes normally where it's treated best, and the Magnificent Seven has treated money very well.
No. You look at the price of NVDA, it's absolutely irrational. Okay.
Right, but people have made money, and they've continued to make money until just recently, right? So, you know, what I'm saying is money goes to where it's treated best. Those stocks have performed, but now they're starting to perform poorly. And then we'll have to see if that money leaves and finds another sector. Final topic, sentiment. I mean, you're always talking about being a contrarian. You're either a contrarian or a victim. You mentioned zinc. We talked about copper. So base metals have been hammered since May. I mean, zinc at 118 a pound. It's basically, I think most mines are not profitable at that price level right now. Copper's a little higher. I think it's still above the marginal like average cost of most miners, but zinc and lead are very depressed. One stock we've talked about quite a few times is ELO on the TSX, and they have a lot of zinc, lead, they have some copper, silver, lots of silver, 300 million ounces of silver. You know, if you look at the Eloro chart since May, it's basically a ski slope straight down, very much like the copper and zinc price. Is this a contrarian opportunity here at $1.10 a share at Eloro?
Well, you failed to mention tin.
Oh yeah, 10, yes.
Okay, and they've got tin and easily the potential for being the biggest tin deposit in the world. I'll say because of management errors in financing, in announcing a resource, and simply, I own a lot of Eloro, and frankly, I have no idea what they're doing because they're not saying. And the fastest way to kill any stock is to do nothing and say nothing. And that's exactly what's killing it. There's no limit to how low Eloro could go. They need to have some news. They need to do something. So you can go back to 2008. I saw stocks that I put money into placements in March of 2008 at 95 cents. I saw it go to 6 cents in October. Okay. So we haven't had a real monster crash in the resource stocks since 2015, 2016, but we certainly could see it. And Eloro needs to do something. It's a management issue. It's not an issue of the deposit. They got 3 billion tons of ore. Okay. They've got a magnificent 43101, and they're doing a really poor job of communication.
So, I mean, I think they have a plan to tighten the spacing on the higher grade, you know, near surface pit area, and get it to a higher category, you know, instead of inferred. And that's going to take about 10,000 meters of core drilling. So I would say that's probably next up for the company. And then they have some very attractive step out targets as well. There's this big chargeability anomaly. I believe it's to the southeast of the main, you know, pit area that needs to be tested. So yeah, I mean, I agree with you. It's time to drill it's time to take action. I wonder if there's a seasonality aspect to the recent, relative lull in the company news, and they're going to pick up that news flow in the second half of the year.
There's something that we rarely talk about, and we should talk about because it's really important. Big projects, and Eloro is not a big project. Eloro is a giant project. Big projects consume big money. Giant projects consume giant money.
Mm.
Eloro could spend $50 million on drilling, and it wouldn't materially change very much. Okay. They're going to end up spending 50, 100, 200 million just in drilling because it's so big. But to give you an idea, and this is why people spend that kind of money, I'm a shareholder in Minera San Cristobal. And I believe the number that I've read and been told, I think the cost of processing, mining, and milling silver, lead, and zinc is about $3.50 a ton. Now you go up to the Yukon, you go up to Snowline after you put the road in, after you put the power in. You could be talking about $50, $60, $80 a ton for processing. Okay, the Yukon is just damn expensive to do everything. Bolivia is cheap. Okay, so what Eloro desperately needs right now is a major to come in with deep pockets, and so far it doesn't look like they've been very successful doing that. That's what they should be focused on. They need a major with deep pockets who wants to belly up the bar and bring their checkbook out, put a bunch of zeros on a check.
Okay. And on that note, we will leave it there, Bob. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, and I'm really interested in seeing this. I mean, obviously, send me the link, but I think we made progress, even though I enjoyed the way we used to do it.
Yes, yes, I agree. Cheers.